Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to the episode 6 of Mahabharata Reading Challenge. How have you been feeling, my dear friends? Are you able to read this along with me? Okay, I hope that you are able to read this along with me. And like always, let's start the reading with the prayers. Firstly, prayers from Hanuman Chalisa, Doha, Shri Guru Charan Saroj Raj, Nijman Mukur Sudhar, Barnav Raghubar, Bimal Jasu, Jo Dayaku Filchar, बुद्धहीन तानु जानिके सुमिरो पवन कुमार बल बुद्धि विद्या देह मोहि हरहु कलेस विकार. Knowing that this mind of mine has less intelligence, I remember the son of wind, who, granting me strength, wisdom, and all kinds of knowledge, removes all my sufferings and shortcomings. निश्चय प्रेम प्रतीत ते विनय करु सम्मान, तेहि के कारज सकल शुभ सिद्ध करे हनुमान. जय हनुमान संत हितकारी, सुन लीजिए प्रभु अर्ज हमारी, जन के काज विलम्ब न कीजिए, आतुर दोर महासुख दीजिए. आंखें देखे मौन मुख, सहा कहा नहीं जाए, लेख विधाता का लिखा, कौन किसे समझाए, कौन किसे समझाए. वचन दिया सोचा नहीं, होगा क्या परिणाम, सोच समझ कर कीजिए जीवन में हर काम, जीवन में हर काम. जीवन को समझा रहा जिया हुआ इतिहास, जीवन को समझा रहा जिया हुआ इतिहास. जब तक तन में श्वास है तब तक मन में आस, तब तक मन में आस. आस कह रही श्वास से धीरज धरना सीख, मांगे बिन मोती मिले, मांगे मिले ना भीख, मांगे मिले ना भीख. है कथा संग्राम की, विश्व के कल्याण की, धर्म अधर्म आदि अनंत, सत्य असत्य कलेश कलंक, स्वार्थ की कथा परमार्थ की. शक्ति है भक्ति है, जन्मों की मुक्ति है, जीवन का ये संपूर्ण सार है. युग युग से कण कण में, सृष्टि के दर्पण में, वेदों की कथा अपार है, धर्मों की गाथा है, देवों की भाषा है, सदियों के इतिहास का प्रमाण है. कृष्णा की महिमा है, गीता की गरिमा है, ग्रंथों का ये ग्रंथ महान है, महाभारत. सुख करता दुख हरता, वार्ता विघ्नाची, हो वार्ता विघ्नाची, नुरवी पूर्वी प्रेम कृपाया जायाची. सर्वांगी सुंदर उतिशेंदुराची, हो उतिशेंदुराची, कांठी चालके माला मुक्ता फाल्हांची. जयदेव जयदेव जय मंगल मूर्ति, जयदेव जयदेव जय मंगल मूर्ति, दर्शन मात्रे मनोकामना पूर्ति. जयदेव जयदेव जय मंगल मूर्ति, हो श्री मंगल मूर्ति, दर्शन मात्रे मनोकामना पूर्ति. Jaidev Jaidev Jai Mangal Murti. Today we have included the 16 names of Vishnu for like we should invoke these 16 names of Vishnu while we are doing anything, like you'll see here. Think him as Vishnu while taking medicine, as Janardhan while eating food, as Padmanabha while in the bed, as Prajapati at the time of marriage, as Chakradhara while engaged in war, as Trivikrama while on travel, Narayana on deathbed, Sridhara while meeting the beloved, as Govinda while tossing the bad dreams, as Madhusudana while in troubles, as Narsimha while in forest, as Varha while struggling in water, as Raghunandan while lost in a mountain, as Vamana while on the move, and as Madhava while doing everything. So we know that we are reading Mahabharata by C. Raja Gopalachari, and we have done until day 5 Pasupata. Today we are on day 6 and we are going, let's see if we can do until Ashtavakra. Let me get to the chapter number 30. It's raining outside today, and it's a very beautiful weather to read Mahabharata. And in a calm state of mind, one can dedicate his attention towards reading Mahabharata. Okay, where is chapter number 30? Affliction is nothing new. Balrama and Krishna came with their retinue to the abode of Pandavas in the forest. Deeply distressed by what he saw, Balrama said to Krishna, O Krishna, it would seem that virtue and wickedness bear contrary fruit in this life. Where is my red pen? O Krishna, it would seem that virtue and wickedness bear contrary fruit in this life. For see, the wicked Duryodhan is ruling his kingdom clad in silk and gold, while the virtuous Yudhishthir lives in the forest wearing the bark of trees, seeing such unmerited prosperity and undeserved privation. Men have lost their faith in God. The praise of virtue in the Shastra seems mere mummery when we see the actual results of good and evil in this world. How will Dhritarashtra justify his conduct and defend himself when he is face to face with the god of death? So Balrama here is telling to Krishna or saying to Krishna that virtuous man is living in the forest wearing the bark of trees, and the wicked Duryodhan, he's ruling the kingdom in the silk and gold. So he's doubtful, like he's telling that men will lost their faith in God if they bear contrary fruit in this life. So, and also he says that how will Dhritarashtra justify his conduct and defend himself when he is face to face with the god of death? Even the mountains and earth weep at the sight of blameless Pandavas dwelling in the forest with the blessed Draupadi, born from the sacrificial fire, Satyaki. Now the other sage, Satyaki, who was seated near, said, O Balrama, there is no time for lamenting. Should we wait till Yudhishthir asks us to do our duty for the Pandavas? While you and Krishna and all other relations are living? Why should the Pandavas waste their precious years in the forest? Let us collect our forces and attack Duryodhan. With the army of the Vrishnis, we are surely strong enough to destroy the Kauravas. Why? Where is the need to foil Karna's vaunted archery and cut off his head? Let us kill Duryodhan and his adherents in the battlefield and hand over the kingdom to Abhimanyu if the Pandavas wish to keep their word and stay in the forest. See, now the other sage, Satyaki, who was sitting near to them, and upon hearing Balrama, he also said, O Balrama, there is no time for lamenting. Should we wait till Yudhishthir asks us to do our duty for Pandavas? While you and Krishna and all other relations are living, why should the Pandavas waste their precious in the forest? So just like being a relative, when you are going through some difficult situation, your relatives tend to suggest you something. And so he's saying that we are the relative of Pandavas. While you and Krishna and all other relations are living, why should Pandavas waste their precious year in the forest? Let us collect our forces and attack Duryodhan with the army of the Vrishnis, and we are surely strong enough to destroy the Kauravas. Why? Where is the need to foil? And we can cut off Karna's head and kill Duryodhan and his adherents in the battlefield and hand over the kingdom to the Abhimanyu. Okay, so Vasudeva, who was listening carefully to this speech, said, What you say is true. But the Pandavas would not like to receive from the hands of others what they have not won by their own efforts. Draupadi, for one, born of a heroic race as she is, would not hear of it. Yudhishthir will never give up the path of righteousness for love or fear. When the stipulated period of exile is over, the king of Panchala, Kekaya and Chedi and ourselves will unite our forces to help the Pandavas to conquer their enemies. Yudhishthir was delighted at this word of Krishna. So basically, Krishna said, you know, Pandavas would not like to receive from the hands of other what they have not won by their own efforts. So Krishna knows their conduct. Draupadi also is born of a heroic race, would not hear of it. Yudhishthir will never give up the path of righteousness for love or fear. Yudhishthir was delighted at these words of Krishna. Sri Krishna knows my mind, said he. Truth is greater than power or prosperity and has to be guarded at all cost and not the kingdom. So here a clear message is given that truth is greater than anything, be it power, money, prosperity, or the kingdom, and it should be guarded at all cost. When he wants us to fight, he shall find us ready. The heroes of the Vrishni race may now return with the certainty that we shall meet again with the time when the time is ripe. And also he tells to the heroes of the Vrishni race who came along with the sages to help them, to give them this proposal that okay, we can fight on behalf of you. You don't need to waste your precious years in the forest. As we know, Yudhishthir is virtuous and he will never give up the path of righteousness for love or fear. He said, the heroes of Vrishni race may now return with the certainty that we shall meet again when the time is ripe. When there is a time for the fight, we will be ready for that. With these words, Yudhishthir gave them leave to return. Arjuna was still away in the Himalayas and Bhima's anxiety and impatience became well high insupportable. He said to Yudhishthir, you know that our life depends on Arjuna. So Bhima is now being really anxious and nervous and insupportable. He is acting insupportable. And he said, you know that our life depends on Arjuna. He has been away very long and we have had no tidings of him. If he should be lost to us, then neither the king of Panchala, nor Satyaki, nor even Sri Krishna can save us. And I, for one, cannot survive that loss. All this we owe to that mad game of dice, our sorrows and sufferings, as well as the growing strength of our foes. So basically, we can see here that how the Bhima is, anxious and he's acting insupportable, and also he's fearful also, as we can say, because he has not heard from Arjuna since long, and he is telling that if he's the only, our life depends on Arjuna. If he's lost, if he, we have like if he is if he's lost, then neither the king of Panchala nor Satyaki nor even Sri Krishna can save us. See, he does not know. See, Krishna was being with them, but still they were not aware of the supremacy of Lord Krishna, or maybe they are kept ignorant. Here, I don't know about that, but yeah, see, he's doubting. And I, for one, cannot survive that loss. And even he is grieving for the thing that has not happened yet. Like in his imagination, he is saying that since we have not heard from Arjuna since long, I'm not sure if if he should be lost to us, then no one can save us from this unfortunate happenings in our life. And for sure, I cannot survive that loss. I cannot survive the loss of my dear brother Arjuna. And then he started to blame. All this we owe to that mad game of dice, our sorrows and suffering, as well as the growing strength of our foes. To be dwelling in the forest is not the duty enjoined on a Kshatriya. We should immediately recall Arjun and wage war with the sons of Dhritarashtra with the help of Sri Krishna. So he says that now he wants to act in a panic. He says we should immediately recall Arjun and wage war with the sons of Dhritarashtra with the help of Sri Krishna. I shall be satisfied only when the wicked Shakuni, Karna, and Duryodhana are slain. After this clear duty is done, you may, if you like, return to the forest and live a life of asceticism. It is not a sin to kill by a stratagem an enemy who has resorted to stratagem. So he is also telling Yudhishthira that it is not a sin to kill by stratagem an enemy who has resorted to stratagem. So it is not a sin to kill someone by strategies, not someone but an enemy with a strategy who has always resorted to strategies. I have heard that Atharvedas has incantations, or maybe it's incarnations, I'm not sure what is it. Incantation which can compress time and reduce its span. If we could by such means squeeze 13 years into 13 days, we would be perfectly justified doing so. And you will permit me on the 14th day to kill Duryodhan. So basically, Bhima is acting like us, whenever we are in the middle of something which is too much, which is like heavy to bear or difficult to bear or an obstacle for us, we tend to behave similarly. We become anxious during that time of the situation, and often we take wrong decisions, or these thoughts come into our mind. These kind of thoughts come into our mind, but one should always, it's a very difficult practice, I know, to keep calm in difficult situations, to be calm in difficult situations, to not to act clever, to be just I don't know, but it comes with the practice. Even I am practicing this. It's a long journey of a practice to stay calm in the difficult situations, in the time of trials, One should be calm. So, see, he's saying that, okay, we know the Vedas, we have read it. Bhima has, of course, at that time, they were all virtuous. The Pandavas were virtuous and they have learned the Vedas, the this martial arts, everything. So he was telling that, I have read Atharvedas, and by such means we can reduce this 13 years into 13 days. We would be perfectly justified in doing it. You will permit me on the 14th day to kill Duryodhan. Hearing these words of Bhima, Dharmaputra affectionately embraced him. Dharmaputra is Yudhishthira here, because Bhima was telling this to Yudhishthira, and sought to restrain his impetuosity. Beloved brother, as soon as the period of 13 years is over, Arjuna, the hero with Gandiva bow, and yourself will fight and kill Duryodhan. Be patient till then. Duryodhan and his followers who are sunk in sin cannot escape. Be assured of it. So he is now telling him affectionately, beloved brother, as soon as the period of 13 years is over, Arjun, the hero with Gandiva bow, and yourself will fight and kill Duryodhan. Be patient till then. And he is also telling, Yudhishthira here is telling Duryodhan and his followers who are sunk in sin cannot escape. Be assured of it. So anyone who is sunk in sin cannot escape of the adversities or miseries. Be assured of it. While the sorrow-stricken brothers engaged in debate, the great sage Brihadvasa came to the hermitage of the Pandavas and was received with customary honors. So while they were debating about the sorrow-stricken, of course they were sorrow-stricken, and they were engaged in such kind of debates where they were questioning everything, where they were confused. So there came a great sage known as Brihadasva, and he was received with customary honors. After a while, Yudhishthira said to him, Revered sage, our deceitful enemies drew us into this game of dice and cheated us of our kingdoms and riches, and drove my heroic brother as well as Panchali myself to the forest. Arjuna, who left us a long time to get divine weapon, has not returned as yet, and we miss him sorely. Will he return with the divine arm? And when will he come back? Surely never was there in this world a man who suffered so much sorrow as myself. So see, that's a continuous loop. Bhima was, it's very relatable to the modern times, Bhima was suffering mentally and he was telling all this to think. All of his energy is now transferred to the Yudhishthir, and he's also now started complaining because they both are sorrow stricken. And now, since he met this Brihadasva, he's telling him that, that how we lost how we were decided and we were defeated and cheated by the Kauravas. We have lost all the riches and kingdoms. And me, my brother, and my beautiful wife Panchali, we are in the forest. And you know that Arjuna, who left us long time to get divine weapons, has not returned as yet. And we miss him sorely. Will he return back with will he return with divine arms? And when will he be back? Surely never. And then he said that he becomes like, there is never such a man who has seen who has suffered so much sorrow as myself. So we always say that only we are the one who are suffering, but there are many people in the world who are suffering. Okay, the great sage replied, do not let your mind dwell on sorrow. Arjuna will return with divine weapons and you will conquer your enemies in the fitness of time. So the sage is telling that, when the right time will come, you will be able to conquer your enemies. You say that there is no one in this world as unfortunate as you. Now that is not true. Though everyone tried by adversity is inclined to claim preeminence in sorrows. Because things felt are more than things heard or seen. That's so beautiful. Have you heard of King Nala of Nishadha? He suffered more sorrows than yourself even in the forest. He was deceived by Pushkara at the game of dice. He lost his wealth and kingdom and had to go in exile to the forest. Less fortunate than you, he had not with him his brothers or Brahmins. The influence of Kali, the spirit of dark age, deprived him of his discrimination and good sense. And not knowing what he was doing, he deserted his wife who had accompanied him and wandered about in the forest, solitary and almost mad. Now compare your state with his. You have the company of your heroic brother and devoted wife and are supported by few learned Brahmins in your adversity. Your mind is sound and steady. Self pity is natural, but you are really not so badly off. So here, this great sage Brihadasva, he is trying to make him, because they are suffering now in imagination also. He's trying to take him to the reality that there are many other sages or many other emperors or the kings who have suffered lot more than you. So he is giving one example of this Nala of Nishada, who also was deceived by Pushkarma at the game of dice. Okay, so he's telling he lost his wealth, kingdom, and so on. He's explaining his situation, and by this he's trying to console Yudhishthir that self pity is natural, but you are not so badly off. The sage then narrated the life of Nala, which constitute 28 chapters of the great epic. The sage concluded with these words: O Pandava, Nala was tried by sorrows more agonizing than yours. Yet he triumphed over them all, and his life ended happily. You have the elevations of unclouded intellect and the society of your nearest and dearest. You spend much of your time in exalted contemplation of dharma and in holy converse with the Brahmins who are learned in Vedas and Vedantas. Bear your trials and tribulations with fortitude, for they are the lot of men and not peculiar to you. That is so good lesson. So good wisdom. Like the sage is telling him that you have the as you are feeling your this all the pain, you are clouded in your judgment. Your intellect has clouded, and the society of you spend so much of time in reading about dharma and having holy conversations with Brahmins who are learned in the Vedas and Vedantas. Bear your trials and tribulation with fortitude, for they are the lot of men and not peculiar to you. That is very important. I am going to write this into my thesis, acknowledgements, or quote: bear your trials and tribulation with fortitude, for they are the lot of men's and not peculiar to you. Thus did the sage Brihadasva console Yudhishthira. The Brahmins who had been with Yudhishthira in Indraprastha had followed him to the forest. It was difficult to maintain such a large establishment. Some time after Arjuna had gone on his quest of Pasupata, a Brahmin sage named Lomasa came to the abode of Pandavas. So now another sage, Lomasa, came to the abode of Pandavas. He advised Yudhishthira to minimize his retinue before going on pilgrimage, as it would be difficult to move freely from place to place with a large following. So he is telling that please, it will be difficult to move freely from place to place with a large number of followers. So you should minimize that. Yudhishthira, and they are going to have the pilgrimage now. Okay, so Yudhishthir, who had long felt that difficulty, announced to his followers that such of them as were unaccustomed to her hardship and to hard and sanctity fare, and those who had followed merely in token of loyalty might return to Dhritarashtra, or if they preferred it, go to Draupada, the king of Panchala. Later, with greatly reduced routine, the Pandavas started on a pilgrimage to a holy places, acquainting themselves with the stories and traditions relating to each. The story of Agastya was one such. So later, with the sage Lomasa, they started the pilgrimage to holy places, acquainting themselves with the stories and tradition relating to each of that place. So that the story of Agastya was one such. So Agastya, it is said, one saw some ancestral spirit dangling head down and asked them who they were and how they had come to be in that unpleasant plight. They replied, Dear child, we are your ancestor. If you discharge not your debt to us by marrying and begetting progeny, there will be no one after you to offer us oblations. We have therefore resorted to this austerity in order to persuade you to save us from this peril. When Agastya heard this, he decided to marry. The king of country of Vidarbha was childless and so careworn. He repaired to Agastya to get this blessing. to get his blessing. In granting him the boon, Agastya announced that the king would be the father of a beautiful girl who he stipulated should be given in marriage to him. Soon the queen gave birth to a girl who was named Lopamudra. She grew with years into maiden of such rare beauty and charm that she became celebrated in Kshatriya world, but no prince dared to woo her for fear of Agastya. Later the sage Agastya came to Vidarbha and demanded the hand of king's daughter. The king was reluctant to give the delicately nurtured princess in marriage to a sage leading the primitive life of forester, but he also feared the anger of the sage if he said nay and was plunged in sorrow. Lopamudra, greatly concerned, discovered the cause of her parents' unhappiness and expressed her readiness, nay, her desires to marry the sage. The king was relieved, and the marriage of Agastya and Lopamudra was celebrated in due course. When the princess set out to accompany the sage, he bade her give up her costly garments and valuable jewels. Unquestioningly, Lopamudra distributed her priceless jewels and garment amongst her companions and attendants, and covering herself in deerskin and garments of bark, she joyfully accompanied the sage. During the time Lopamudra and Agastya spent in tapas and meditation at Gangadwara, a strong and abiding love sprang up between them. For conjugal life, Lopamudra's modesty shrank from the lack of privacy in a forest hermitage. And one day, with blushing and humbleness, she expressed her mind to her husband. She said, "My desire is that I may have the royal bedding, the beautiful robes, and the valuable jewels I had when I was in my father's place, and that you too may have splendid garments and ornaments, and then we shall enjoy life to our heart's content." Agastya smilingly replied, "I have neither the wealth nor the facilities to provide what you want. Are we not beggars living in the forest?" But Lopamudra knew her lord's yogic power and said, "Lord, you are all powerful by strength of your austerities. You can get the wealth of the whole world in a moment if you, but well." Agastya said that no doubt that was so, but if he spent his austerities in gaining things of such little moment as riches, they would soon dwindle to nothing. She replied, "I do not wish that. What I desire is that you should earn in the ordinary way sufficient wealth for us to live in ease and comfort." Agastya consented and set out as an ordinary Brahman to beg of various kings. Agastya went to a king who was reputed to have come in the quest of wealth. "Give me what I seek without causing any loss or injury to others." The king presented a true picture of the income and expenditure of the state and told him he was free to take what he deemed fit. The sage found from the accounts that there was no balance left. The expenditure of state turns out always to be at least equal to its income. This seems to have been in the case in ancient time also. Seeing this, Agastya said, "To accept any gift from this king will be a hardship to the citizens, so I shall seek elsewhere." And the sage was about to leave. The king said that he would also accompany him, and both of them went to another state where also they found the same state affairs. Vyasa thus lays down and illustrates the maxims that a king should not tax his subjects more than necessary for rightful public expenditure, and that if one accepts as gift anything from the public revenues, one adds to a burden of the subjects to that extent. Agastya thought he had better go to the wicked Asura Ilvala and try his luck. Ilvala and his brother Vatapi cherished an implacable hatred towards Brahmins. They had curious plans for killing them. Ilvala would, with effective hospitality, invite a Brahmin to a feast. By the power of his magic, he would transform his brother Vatapi into a goat, and he would kill this pseudo goat for food and serve its meat to the guest. In those days, the Brahmins used to eat meat. The feast over, Ilvala would invoke his brother Vatapi to come out, for he had the art of bringing back to life those whom he had killed. And Vatapi, who as food had entered the vitals of the unlucky Brahman, would spring up the sound and hole and rent his way out with fiendish laughter, of course, killing the guest in doing so. In this manner, many Brahmins had died. Ilvala was very happy when he learned that Agastya was in the neighborhood, since he felt that here was a good Brahmana delivered into his hands. He welcomed him and prepared the usual feast. The sage ate heartily of Vatapi transformed into a goat. So he welcomed him and prepared the usual feast. The sage ate heartily of Vatapi transformed into a goat, and it only remained for Ilvala to call out Vatapi for the rending scene. And as usual, Ilvala repeated the magic formula and shouted, Vatapi, come out. Agastya smiled and, gently rubbing his stomach, said, O Vatapi, be digested in my stomach for the peace and good of the world. Ilvala shouted again and again in frenetic fear, O Vatapi, come forth. There was no response, and the sage explained the reason. Vatapi had been digested. The trick had been tried once too often. The Asura bowed to Agastya and surrendered to him the riches he sought. Thus was the sage able to satisfy Lobamudra's desire. So Agastya was able to satisfy his wife's desire to get the riches. Agastya asked her what she would prefer, whether 10 ordinarily good sons or one super good sons with the strength of 10. Lopamudra replied she would like to have one exceptionally virtuous and learned son. The story goes that she was blessed with such a gifted son. Once the Vindyas became jealous of the Meru mountain and tried to grow in stature, obstructing the sun, the moon, the planets. Unable to prevent this danger, the god sought aid from Agastya. The sage went to the Vindhya mountain and said, Best of mountains, stop you are growing till I cross you on my way to south and return north again. After my return, you can grow as you like. Wait till then. Since the Vindhya mountain respected Agastya, it bowed to his request. Agastya did not return north at all but settled in the south, and so the Vindhyas remain arrested in growth to this day. Such is the story as narrated in the Mahabharata. Rishyasringa. It is an error to think that it is easy for a person to lead a life of chastity if he is brought up in complete ignorance of sensual pleasures. Virtue guarded only by ignorance is very insecure, as illustrated by the following story. It is told in the Ramayana also, but not in the same detail. Vibhandaka, who was resplendent like a Brahma, the creator, lived with his son Sringa. in a forest. The latter had not come across any mortal man or woman except his father. The country of Anga was once afflicted with a dire famine. Crops have withered for the want of rain, and men perish for lack of food. All the living things were in distress. Romapta, the king of the country, approached the Brahmins to advise him of some means of saving the kingdom from this famine. The Brahmins replied, "Best of the kings, there is a young sage called Rishyasringa who lives a life of perfect chastity. Invite him to our kingdom. He has won the power by his austerities of bringing rain and plenty wherever he goes." So the Brahmana replied that call this young sage Rishyasringa. He has won the power by his austerities of bringing rain and plenty wherever he goes. So he is blessed with abundance. The king discussed with his courtiers the means by which Rishyasringa could be brought from the hermitage of the sage Vibhandaka. In accordance with their advice, he called together the most charming courtesan of the city and entrusted them with the mission of bringing Rishyasringa to Anga. The damsels were in quandary. On the other hand, they feared to disobey the king. On the other, they also feared the sage's wrath. Finally, they made up their mind to go, relying on the providence to help them in achieving the good work of rescuing the stricken land from famine. They were suitably equipped for their enterprise before being sent to the hermitage. The leader of this band of courtesans made a beautiful garden of a big board with artificial trees and creepers, with an imitation ashrama in the center. She had the boat moored in the river near Vibhandaka's hermitage, and the courtesans visited the hermitage with quaking herds. Luckily for them, the sage was not at home. Feeling that this was the opportune moment, one of the beautiful damsel went to the sage's son. She thus addressed Rishyasringa, "Great sage, are you well? Have you sufficient roots and fruit? Are the princes of the are the penance of the rishis of the forest proceeding satisfactorily? Is your father's glory constant growing? Is your own study of Vedas progressing?" This was how rishis used to accost one another in those days. The youthful anchorite had never before seen such a beautiful human form or heard such a sweet voice. The instinctive yearning for society, especially for the opposite sex, though he had never seen a woman before, began to work on his mind from the moment he beheld that graceful form. He thought that she was a young sage like himself, and he felt a strange, irrepressible joy surging his soul, up in his soul. He answered, fixing eyes on his interlocutor, "You seem to be a bright brahmacharin. Who are you? I bow to you. Where is your hermitage? What are the austerities you are practicing?" And he rendered her the customary offerings. She said to him, "At a distance of 3 yojanas from here is my ashram. I have brought foods for you. I am not fit to receive your prostration, but I shall return your greetings and salutation in the way customary with us." She embraced him warmly, fed him with sweets she had brought, decorated him with the perfumed garlands, and served him with drinks. She embraced him again, saying that was their way of salutation to be to honored guest. He thought it was a very agreeable way. Shortly after, fearing the return of the sage, Vibhandaka, the courtesan, took her leave of Rishyasringa, saying it was time for her to perform the Agnihotra sacrifice, and gently slipped out of the hermitage. When Vibhandaka returned to the hermitage, he was shocked to see the place so untidy with sweet meats scattered all over, for the hermitage had not been cleansed. The shrubs and creepers looked draggled and untidy. His son's face had not its usual luster but seemed clouded and disturbed as by a storm of passion. The usual simple duties of the hermitage had been neglected. Vibhandaka was troubled and asked his son, "Dear boy, why have you not yet gathered the sacred firewoods? Who has broken these nice plants and shrubs? Has the cow been milked? Has anyone been here to serve you? Who gave you this strange garland? Why do you appear worried?" The simple and ingenuous Rishi Rishyasringa replied, "A brahmacharin of wonderful form was here. I cannot describe his brightness and beauty or the sweetness of his voice. My inner being has been filled with indescribable happiness and affection by listening to his voice and looking at his eyes. When he embraced me, which it seems is his customary greetings, I experienced a joy which I have never felt before. No, not even when eating the sweetest fruit." And then he described to his father the form, beauty, and the doings of his fair visitors. Rishyasringa added wistfully, "My body seemed to burn with desire for the company of the brahmacharin, and I should like to go and find him and bring him here somehow. How can I give you any idea about his devotion and brightness? My heart pants to see him." When Rishyasringa had thus brokenly expressed yearnings and disturbances to which he had hitherto been a stranger, Vibhandaka knew that what had occurred. He said, "Child, this was no brahmacharin that you saw, but a malignant demon who sought, as demons do, to beguile us and hinder our penance and austerities. They take recourse to many kinds of tricks and stratagems for the purpose. Do not let them come near you." After the Vibhandaka searched in vain for 3 days in the forest to find out the wretches who had done this injury, and returned it in baffled at his purpose. On the another occasion, when Vibhandaka had gone out of the hermitage to bring roots and fruits, the courtesan again came softly to the place where Rishyasringa was seated. As soon as he saw her at a distance, Rishyasringa jumped up and ran to greet her gushingly, as pent up water surges out of a reservoir that has sprung a leak. Even without waiting for prompting this time, Rishyasringa went near her and after the customary salutation said, "O shining brahmacharin, before my father returns, let us go to your hermitage." This was just what she had hoped and worked for, and together they entered the boat, which had been made to look like a hermitage. As soon as the young sage had entered, the boat was freed from its moorings and floated easily down with its welcome freight to the kingdom of Anga. As might be expected, the young sage had a pleasant and interesting journey, and when he reached Anga, he certainly knew more about the world and its way than he had done in the forest. The coming of Rishyasringa delighted Romapada infinitely, and he took his welcome guest to the luxuriously provided inner apartment, specially prepared for him. As foretold by Brahmins, rain began to pour the instant Rishyasringa set his foot in the country. The rivers and the lakes were full and people rejoiced. Romapada gave his daughter Shanta in marriage to Rishyasringa. Through Though all ended as he had planned, the king was uneasy in his mind, for he was afraid that Vibhandaka might come in search of his son and pronounce a curse on him. So he sought to mollify Vibhandaka by lining the route he would take with kettles and kind, and by instructing the cowherds in charge to say that they were Rishyasringa's servant and had come to welcome and honor their master's father and place themselves at his service. Not finding his son anywhere in the hermitage, the enraged Vibhandaka thought that this might be the work of King of Anga. He crossed intervening rivers and villages and marched to the capital of the king as if to burn him in his anger. But as at each stage of the journey he saw magnificent cattle which belonged to his son and was respectfully welcomed by his son's servant, his angry mood passed gradually and he approached the capital. When he came to capital, he was received with great honors and taken to the king's palace, where he saw his son sitting in a state like the king of gods in heaven. He saw by his side his wife, the princess Shanta, whose great beauty soothed and pleased him. Vibhandaka blessed the king. He laid this injunction on his son: do all that will please this king. After the birth of a son, come and join me in the forest. Rishyasringa did as his father bade him. Lomasa concluded the story with these words addressed to Yudhishthir: like Damayanti and Nala, Sita and Rama, Arundhati and Vashishta, Lopamudra and Agastya, and Draupadi and yourself, Shanta and Rishyasringa, repaired to the forest in the fullness of time and spent their lives in mutual love and worship of God. This is the hermitage where Rishyasringa lived. Bathe in this water, be purified. The Pandavas bathed there and performed their devotions. Fruitful penance. In the course of their wanderings, the Pandavas reached the hermitage of Rebhya on the bank of Gangas. Lomasa told them the story of the place. This is the ghat where Bharat, the son of Dashratha, bathed. These waters cleansed Indra of the sin of killing Vrita unfairly. Here also Shanta Kumara became one with the god. Aditi, the mother of gods, offered oblations on this mountain and prayed to blessed with the sun. O Yudhishthir, ascend this holy mountain, and the misfortunes which have cast a cloud on your life will vanish. Anger and passion will be washed off if you bathe in the running water of this river. Then Lomasa expatiated in great detail on the sanctity of the place. He began the story thus: Yavakrida, the son of Sage, met with the destruction in this very place. He continued, there lived in their hermitage two eminent Brahmins named Bharadwaja and Raibhya, who were dear friends. Raibhya and his two sons, Paravasu and Arvavasu, learned the Vedas and became famed scholar. Bharadwaja devoted himself wholly to the worship of God. He had a son named Yavakrida, who saw with jealousy and hatred that the Brahmins did not respect his ascetic father, and as they did the learned Rabhya. Yavakrida practiced hard penance to gain the grace of Indra. He tortured his body with austerities and thus awakened the compassion of Indra, who appeared and asked him why he so mortified his flesh. Yavakrita replied, I wish to be more learned in the Vedas than any has ever been before. I wish to be a great scholar. I am performing these austerities to realize that desires. It takes a long time and involves much hardship to learn the Vedas from a teacher. I am practicing austerities to acquire that knowledge directly. Bless me. Indra smiled and said, "O Brahmana, you are on the wrong path. Return home, seek a proper preceptor, and learn the Vedas from him. Austerities is not the way of learning. The path is study and the study alone." With these words, Indra vanished, but the son of Bharatwaja would not give up. How many of us in the school before the exam day used to spend our night in praying to Hanumanji, like reciting Hanuman Chalisa 100 times to make us, this time only serve us, please, in this exam. I will study next time. So Indra smiled and said, You cannot gain the knowledge of Vedas by performing austerities, but the path is only to study and study alone, or see the proper preceptor, a spiritual, or seek the spiritual guidance, spiritual master who can teach you that. He pursued his course of austerities with even greater rigor. To the horror and the distress of gods, Indra again manifested himself before Yavakrita and warned him again. You have taken the wrong path to acquire knowledge. You can acquire knowledge only by study. Your father learned the Vedas by patient study, and so can you. Go and study the Vedas. Desist from this vain mortification of the body. Yavakrita did not heed even this second warning of Indra and announced defiantly, that if the prayers were not granted, he would cut off his limbs one by one and offer them as oblations to fire. No, he would never give up. He continued his penance. One morning during his austerities, when he went to bathe in the Ganga, he saw a gaunt old Brahman on the bank laboriously throwing handfuls of sands into water. Yavakrita asked, "Old man, what are you doing?" The old man replied, "I am going to build a dam across the river. When this handful after handful, I have built a dam of sand here. People can cross the river with ease. See how very difficult it is at present to cross it. Useful work, isn't it?" Yavakrita laughed and said, "What a fool you must be to think you can build a dam across the mighty river with your silly handfuls of sand. Arise and take to some more useful work." The old man said, "Is my project more foolish than yours of mastering the Vedas, not by study but by austerities?" Yavakrita now knew that the old man was Indra. More humble this time, Yavakrita earnestly begged Indra to grant him learning as a personal boon. Indra blessed and comforted Yavakrita with the following words: "While I grant you the boon you seek, go and study Vedas. You will become learned." Yavakrita studied the Vedas and became learned. He grew vain with the thought that he had acquired the knowledge of the Vedas through the boon of Indra and not through human tutelage. Bharadwaja did not like this and feared that his son might ruin himself by slighting Raibhya. He thought it is necessary to warn him. "The gods," he said, "grant boons to foolish people who persistently practice penances as intoxicants are sold to fools for money. They lead to the loss of self-control, and this lead to the wrapping of the mind and utter destruction." He illustrated his advice by ancient tale which is given below. In the olden times, There was a celebrated sage named Baladhi. He had a son whose untimely death plunged him into a grief, so he practiced rigorous penance to get a son who would never meet the death. The gods told the sage that this could never be, for the human race was necessarily mortal and there need must be a limit to a human life. They asked him to name his own limit. The sage replied, grant that in that case, grant that life of my son may last as long as the mountain lasts. The, the boon was granted to him, and he was duly blessed with a son named Medhavi. Medhavi grew conceited at the thought he was safe from death forever, since he would live as long as the mountain existed, and he behaved with arrogance towards all. One day, the vain man showed disrespect to a great sage named Dhanu Shaksha. Dhanu Shaksha. At once, that sage cursed that he might be turned to ashes. But the curse took no effect on Medhavi. He remained in perfect health. Seeing this, the high souled sage was puzzled and then remembered the gift Medhavi had been endowed with at birth. Dhanu Shaksha took the form of wild buffalo and by the power of penances butted at mountain and broke into the pieces and Medhavi fell down dead. Bharadwaja concluded the story with the solemn warning to his son, learn wisdom from the old story, be not ruined by vanity, cultivate self-restraint, do not transgress the limit of good conduct, and do not be respectful to great Raibhya. It was springtime. The trees and creepers were beautiful with flowers, and the whole forest was gorgeous with colors and sweet with the songs of birds. The very earth seemed to be under the spell of the god of love. Paravasu's wife was strolling alone in the garden near the hermitage of Raibhya. She appeared more than human in the sweet union in her beauty, courage, and purity. At that time, Yavakrida came there and was so overwhelmed by her loveliness that he completely lost his sense and self-control and became as a ravening beast with lust. He accosted her and taking brutal advantage of her fear and shame and bewilderment, he dragged her to a lonely spot and violated her person. Raibhya returned to his hermitage. He saw his daughter-in-law weeping, broken-hearted and inconsolable, and learning of the shameful outrage perpetrated on her, he was seized with implacable anger. He plucked a hair from his beard and offered it to the fire, reciting a mantra. At once, a maiden as beautiful as his daughter-in-law emerged from the sacrificial fire. The sage plucked another hair from his knotted lock and offered it as oblation. A terrible ghost rose from the fire. The sage commanded them to kill Yavakrida. Both of them bowed to the order. While Yavakrida was performing the morning rites, the female spirit went near him and with smiles and allurements put him off his guard, and she ran away with his water jug. The male ghost rushed on him with uplifted spear. Yavakrida stood up in fear, knowing that his mantra would be of no avail until he cleansed himself with water. He looked for his water jug when he found it missing. He rushed to a pond of water, but the pond was dry. He went to a nearby stream, which was also dried up at his approach. There was no water from him anywhere. The terrible fiend pursued him everywhere, and Yavakrida fled for his life, with the demon hot on his heels. His sins had consumed the power of his vaginas and fasts. vigils, and fasts. At last he sought refuge in the sacrificial hall of his father. The half blind man who was guarding the hermitage stopped him as he could not recognize Yavakreda. As distorted with mortal fear, he sought to force his way in. Meanwhile, the fiend overtook him and killed him with his spear. When Bharadwaja returned to his hermitage, he came upon his son's corpse and concluded that disrespect to Rebha must have led to his cruel fate. Alas, my child, you died of your pride and vanity. Was it not a great mistake that you tried to learn the Vedas in a way not resorted to by any Brahman? Why did you behave so as to be cursed thus? May Raibhya, who caused the death of my only son, be himself killed by one of his sons. Thus carried away by rage and grief, the sage cursed Raibhya. Regaining control soon, he exclaimed in anguish, Alas, they alone are blessed who have no sons. I have not only lost my only son, but in madness of my grief, I have also cursed my friend and companion. What is the use of continuing my life? He cremated his son's body and died by throwing himself on the funeral pyre. We want to read until 36, so we are on the chapter number 35 now. Baladhi we have seen. Now here, mere learning is not enough. King Brihadyumna, a disciple of the sage Rebhya, performed a great sacrifice at which he requested his teacher to let his two sons Paravasu and Arvavasu officiate. Mere learning is not enough. King Brihamanyu, a disciple sage Raibhya, performed a great sacrifice at which he requested his teacher to let his two sons Paravasu and Arvavasu officiate. With the permission of their father, both of them went joyfully to the capital of king. While arrangements were being made for the sacrifice, Paravasu desired one day to go and see his wife, and walking alone all night he reached his hermitage before dawn. Near the hermitage he saw in the twilight what seemed to him a beast of prey crouching for a spring, and hurling his weapon at it killed it. But to his horror and grief he discovered that he had killed his own father, clad in skins, mistaking him for a wild denizen of the forest. He realized that the fatal mistake was the effect of the curse of Bharadwaja. When he had hastily performed the funeral rites of his father, he went to Arvavasu and told him the doleful tale. He said, But this mishap should not interfere with the sacrifice of the king. Please do the rites on my behalf in expiation of the sin I have unwittingly committed. There is mercifully atonement for sins committed in ignorance. If you can be my substitute here for undergoing the expiation, I shall be able to go and assist in conducting the king's sacrifice. I can officiate unaided, which is a thing you cannot do as yet. The virtuous brother agreed and said, You may attend to the king's sacrifice. I shall do penance to free you from the terrible taint of having killed a father and a Brahman. The virtuous Arvavasu accordingly took upon himself the expiatory rites on behalf of his brother. That done, he came to the court of the king to join his brother and assist in the sacrifice. The sin of Paravasu was not washed off, since expiation cannot be by proxy. It tainted his mind with wicked designs. Becoming jealous of the radiance on his brother's face, Paravasu decided to dishonor him by casting on him an injustice as a person, and accordingly, when Arvavasu entered the hall, Paravasu loudly exclaimed so that the king might hear, "This man has committed the sin of killing a Brahmana, and how can he enter this holy sacrificial place? Sacrificial place." Arvavasu indignantly denied the accusation, but none heeded him, and he was ignominiously expelled from that hall of sacrifice by the order of the king. Arvavasu repeatedly protested his innocence. "It is my brother who has committed the sin, and even then it was through a mistake. I have saved him by performing expiatory rites." This made matter worse for him, for nobody believed that the expiation he had undergone was not for his own crime, and everyone thought he was adding false accusation against a blameless brother to his other sins. The virtuous Arvavasu, who besides being falsely accused of monstrous crime, was also slandered as a liar, retreated to the forest in despair of finding justice in the world, and betook himself to rigorous austerities. The gods were gracious and asked him, "O virtuous soul, what is the boon you seek?" High thinking and deep meditation had in the meantime cleansed his heart of all anger at his brother's conduct, and so he only prayed that his father might be restored to the life, and that his brother might be freed from wickedness and sins that he had committed. The gods granted his prayer. Lomasa narrated the story to Yudhishthir at a place near Raibhya hermitage and said, "O Pandavas, bathe here and wash off your passions in this holy river." Arvavasu and Paravasu were both sons of a great scholar. Both of them learnt at his feet and became eminent scholars themselves. But learning is one thing and virtue is quite another. It is true that one should know the difference between good and evil if one is to see good and shun evil, but this knowledge should soak into every thought and influence every action in one's life. Then indeed knowledge becomes virtue. The knowledge that is merely so much undigested information crammed into the mind cannot instill virtue. It is just an outward show like our clothes and is no real part of us. This is so good. These lines are so depthful. So basically, in knowledge becomes virtue, and when the knowledge is so much undigested in the mind, it cannot install virtue, and it is just like an outward show. For example, if we eat anything and it remains undigested, it gives us diseases, right? So that's how if one is gaining knowledge, please take time to process that knowledge in that it can become virtuous, and then instill it in yourself, and then we should seek good and shun evil. Ashtavakra. While the Pandavas were wandering among holy places in the forest, they came one day to the hermitage of the personages immortalized in the Upanishads. Lomasa told Yudhishthir the story of that place. Udalaka, a great sage and teacher of Vedanta, had a disciple named Kagula. Kagula. Kagula, who was virtuous and devoted but had no great learning. See, he was virtuous and devoted but had no great learning. So the other disciple used to laugh and mock at him. Udalaka, however, attached no great weight to his disciples' lack of erudition, but really appreciated his virtues, devotions, and good conduct, and gave his daughter Sujata in marriage to him. The couple was blessed with a son. A child generally inherits the characteristics of both the parents, but fortunately, the grandson of Udalaka took after his grandfather rather than his father and knew the Vedas even while he was in the mother's womb. When Kagula made mistakes, as he often did in reciting the Vedas, the child in the womb would twist his body with pain, and so it came to pass that he had 8 crooked bends in his body when he was born. These crooked bends earned him the name of Ashtavakra, which means 8 crooked bends. Kagula, one ill-fated day, provoked a polemical contest with Vandi, the court scholar of Mithila, and having been defeated was made to drown himself. Meanwhile, Ashtavakra grew up to be a towering scholar. Even in his boyhood and at the age of 12, he had already completed his study of the Vedas and the Vedanta. One day, Ashtavakra learnt that Janaka, the king of Mithila, was performing a great sacrifice, in the course of which the assembled scholars would as usual debate on the Shastras. Ashtavakra set out for Mithila, accompanied by his uncle Swetaketu. On their way to the place of sacrifice at Mithila, they came across the king and his retinue. The attendants of the king marched in front, shouting, "Move away, make way for king." Ashtavakra, instead of moving out on the way, said to the retainers, "O royal attendants, even the king, if he, if, if he is righteous, has to move and make way for the blind, the deformed, the fair sex, person bearing loads, and brahmanas learned in Vedas. This is the rule enjoined by scripture." The king, surprised at these wise words of Brahmana boy, accepted the justness of the rebuke and made way, observing to his attendants, "What this Brahmana stripling says is true. Fire is fire, whether it's tiny or big, it has the power to burn." Ashtavakra and Swiketu entered the sacrificial hall. The gatekeepers stopped them and said, "Boys cannot go in. Only old man learned in Vedas may go into the sacrificial hall." Ashtavakra replied, "We are not mere boys. We have observed the necessary vows and have learned the Vedas. Those who have mastered the truth of the Vedanta will not judge another on mere consideration of age or appearance." The gatekeeper said, "Stop. Have done with your idle brag. Idle brag. How can you, a mere boy, have learnt and realized the Vedanta?" Learnt and realized. The boy said, "You mean I'm not big like an overgrown gout with no substance in it? Size is no indication of knowledge or worth, nor is age. A very tall old man may be a tall old fool. Let me pass." The gatekeeper said, "You are certainly not old nor tall, though you talk like all the hoary sages. Get out." Ashtavakra replied, "Gatekeeper, grey hairs do not prove the ripeness of the soul. The really mature man is the one who has learned the Vedas and Vedangas, mastered their gist and realized their essence. I am here to meet the court Pandit Vandi. Inform King Janaka of my desire." At that moment, the king himself came there and easily recognized Ashtavakra, the precautiously wise boy he had met before. The king asked, "Do you know that my court Pandit Vandi has overthrown an argument many great scholars in the past and caused them to be cast into the ocean? Does that not deter you from this dangerous adventure?" Ashtavakra replied, "Your eminent scholar has not hitherto encountered men like me who are proficient in the Vedas or Vedantas. He has become arrogant and vain with easy victories over good men who were not real scholars. I have come here to repay the debt due on account of my father, who was defeated by this man and made to drown himself, as I have heard from my mother. I have no doubt I shall vanquish Vandi, whom you will see crumple up like a broken wheeled cart. Please summon him." Ashtavakra met Vandi. They took up a debatable thesis and started an argument, each employing his utmost learning and wits to confound the other. And in the end, the assembly unanimously declared the victory of Ashtavakra and the defeat of Vandi. The court Pandit of Mithila bowed his head and paid the forfeit by drowning himself in the ocean and going to the boat of Varuna. Then the spirit of Kagula, the father of Ashtavakra, gained peace and joy in the glory of his son. The author of the epic instructs us through these words put in Kagula's mouth. A son need not like to be his father. A father who is physically weak may have very strong son, and ignorant father may have a scholarly son. It is wrong to assess the greatness of man on his physical appearance or age. External appearance are deceptive, which shows that unlearned Kagula was not devoid of common sense. So, thank you, my dear friends, for your presence and for your. I feel like you are also reading along with me. So I encourage you to read the scriptures because I am also reading it, and let me know in the comments how did you feel about the scriptures. How did you feel about reading this Mahabharata book by Raja Gopalchari? Thank you and have a nice day ahead.